Hey everybody, today we're talking about images for your website and how to create images for storing into the content management system, how to upload these images, and then how to serve them once they are uploaded to your users that are coming to your site. So I think there's a lot to be told about image management, and we could spend the whole day just on all the image formats and how this could be done. The goal of this post is really to look at three methods and three steps that are very simple and that will give you the most impact for your image management. So before we get started, of course, if you run a photography site, obviously you want your photos to be at the highest resolution. That means that compression and other things are not as relevant. So the things we're going to be talking about in this discussion do not really apply to photo sites, because as a photography professional, you want to sell and to display the highest resolution pictures as you can. Now, for the rest of us, you have multiple devices that access your website. You've got desktops, and sometimes those desktops are just a laptop with a small screen, mid-size screen. You've got full desktops with very big monitors, up to now 4K resolution, 3800 pixels width. So that's a lot of real estate. And the question to you, the first question that you have to ask yourself is, do you want the pictures on your website to be sizable to full screen and to show in full screen up to, for example, a 4K monitor with a pixel by pixel resolution? In that case, you would also choose a high setting for your pictures. In most other cases, when your pictures are just part of your theme and your website, these pictures do not need to be zoomed in. They do not need to take the full screen. All they need to do is show at the size of the width of your theme. So let's take an example. If you look at this page we just made about this topic, how to create images, the first slide, the opening slide, is itself an image. And that's could be a photo, it could be a photo, could be a screenshot, could be a slide in that case, but that's an image. So in that case, that image will not be zoomed in. It will be at most the size of the width of the desktop theme. So the first thing you want to do is you want to ask yourself, well, what's the size of my desktop theme width? There's a way to, of course, look into your style sheet, your CSS file, and then you'll find that information. There's a quicker way, which is on your browser, you right-click, you go to Inspect, and you can see that little tab that we highlighted. And when you click on Inspect, by clicking in the center area, in the content area of your desktop theme, it'll give you the width of your desktop theme. In that case, for that website, it's 631 pixels. What this means is that none of the images that we store on the First Practica website will be displayed to any user at more than 631 pixel width. So in theory, we could try to save all of our images at 631 pixels width. They would be small, relatively, and those would be still the largest size that we would ever serve a user. Even if that user has a 4K monitor, that user will never see the image bigger than 631 pixels. Now what you have to think about is, what if one day you change your theme? What if one day you have a theme that is much larger in the content area? You don't want to have at that point to resize all of your photos. So you have to make a judgment call and think, what is the most likely largest size of my content area that I'm going to be using? And then at that point, you can start defining the width that is going to be your large image width. Once you've defined this, you can start saving your images natively before you upload them in that width. What you can do also is go to your CMS settings, and there is a setting for media assets. And in the case of WordPress, it gives you 3 options. And when WordPress saves an image, when you upload an image to your content management system, it will make 3 distinct copies of that image. A large one, and you can define what the large one is. We adjusted that to 700 pixels in our case, because you could see at 631, if we think that in general, over time, over the lifetime of the website, we may not want, this is not a photo site, we may not want to have images bigger than 700 pixels. So if we say large is going to be 700, you can set it at 1000, you can set it at whatever you want. The medium size would be the mobile device version. And then the thumbnail is where potentially widgets on sidebars take thumbnail versions of your images. You don't want the full images to be loaded on a sidebar because it would be very expensive. It would be very consuming bandwidth wise. So you've got all these options. Once you've done that, WordPress has saved multiple copies of the same image, and depending on the device that accesses that page, it'll serve the medium-sized picture to a cell phone, it'll serve the large image to a desktop, and as we discussed, for plugins or for widgets, it'll take a thumbnail version when it needs to take that. So that is going to basically make your storage very efficient on your website, because of course every picture and every image takes some storage space on your blog, and as they accumulate, your storage space goes up. You also pay for bandwidth, so that's going to save some bandwidth, and of course your users pay for bandwidth as well, so everybody wins here. When you go into a post, at that point you're basically writing the article and you're inserting the image into the post. You also have the ability to change the size of your image in the post. So you might ask yourself, well, what's the difference between changing the image size here versus changing it in the settings? Here is where the images are permanently stored in your CMS. Here is, regardless of the image size that you're taking, this is the size that you want that particular post to show the image size. And so you could have a very large image, and then you could decide that you would take a custom size and you make it much smaller. The downside of doing this is that in many cases the web page will load the actual original size that is defined here. So if we have a 1024, it's going to load a 1024 pixel width into the user, and then it's going to resize it down to 750. And the problem, as you can see, is that the user still has to download the big image. It has to download the 1024. And then you're resizing it because you're telling WordPress, for that particular post, I want it at 750. The user will incur the cost of the 1024 size, but it will never get the benefit of the larger size because it's set at 750 maximum. And so search engines don't like this because it's not efficient. It's a cost without benefit. It's the cost of downloading the full file into the user's browser, but no benefit of showing it bigger. Even a mobile device potentially could get a very big image, and then the image gets shrunk when it arrives in the browser. So there's just all the load time, your site gets slower, it consumes bandwidth all over the place on the internet, and then the user has no benefit. So this is mostly to be avoided or minimized. You don't want to have too much difference between the native sizes and the resizing that you do in the image editor. That editor also shows you that you can decide what happens to the image. Do you want a link to the media file? Do you want some other URL to be the destination if somebody clicks on that image? And then the alt text and the title attributes are metadata items that are interesting for social media. Pinterest, for example, I think uses one of these two to show the description of your image in their Pinterest app. So that's a good thing to add it while you're there. So now let's look at what happens when we test that page in the Google PageSpeed tool. I'm really focusing here on the optimization of images, and you can see that there's always something to get better at. It's very hard on optimizing images, like we said, to get to perfection. But when you look at the average cost of a page of 1 megabyte, we're talking about 14 kilobytes, which is a really, really tiny piece of the total cost of the web page. So basically, the images have shrunk to a small size. They display on all of the devices the way they should. And then you see that there are other things, like if you're running, you can see we're running some WordPress plugins with Jetpack, and these also show i2.wp.com. This doesn't come from us, it just comes from a plugin, and it has some pixels, and there's a small amount of data there that can be saved, and that's not in our control. But overall, the images are optimized. The last thing, the second item under past rules, is the compression. Each server that is on a web host has an option to use gzip compression, and it's a setting that you turn on. It can be done in the htaccess file. It can be done in many ways. But basically what this means is that your server will compress the data, just like a zip file, before sending it over to the user. And then the user's browser, when it opens the web page, the browser will automatically decompress. And basically that means that your page is fast. The data traveled faster, smaller on the internet, and then there's no cost to compress and to decompress. So that is that's an added benefit. All right, I hope this was useful. Any question, let us know. Take care.